Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's joined from all over the world. Thank you so much for joining our webinar, how SAP Intelligent Real Estate really enables carbon accounting. And we know that carbon accounting has been a big topic for people throughout the past year or so. So we're going to dive in with my friend Tom Anderson. We'll introduce Tom, but real quick, Tom, thanks again for your support and joining. So, we'll do some housekeeping. We'll talk about the imperatives and challenges of carbon accounting and net zero. Then we'll have a conversation with Tom Anderson, and we'll introduce Tom in a moment. And we'll talk about how SAP Intelligent Real Estate or SAP REFX really can help you now. If you have SAP Real Estate, you really have the tools to help you on your journey to get started on your journey towards net zero and managing carbon accounting. Real quick housekeeping items, as always, the session is being recorded, so please feel free to come back to it, share it with your friends, relatives, anybody who you think might be interested. We'd love it if you shared it and commented on it on LinkedIn. You can ask questions throughout the webinar, so feel free to go ahead and do that. And then again, check out our other webinars. And then, as always, you feel free to contact us. So, check us out, bramasol.com, Apple iTunes, through YouTube and LinkedIn. And then also, as I was doing some research here, Tom, I realized that you did a couple of really good videos, one of them at the real estate convention that happened not too long ago about some of the interesting topics. So, Tom, you do a lot in the space, so I encourage folks to go check those out either through LinkedIn or SAP. So with that, let me introduce Tom Anderson, a friend of ours for, gosh, Tom, how long? We've been working together 6-7 years, specifically on, we started with ASC 842 and IFRS 16, and we've just been working with you over the years on REFX. So again, thank you for your support and welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, John. I also appreciate your support, and it's been fun working together. We started those first conversations about modifications and leasing not being a one-time event, and helping drive that conversation and helping customers understand that leasing is not a one-time event and not a stagnant document, and really needs to be viewed in a process perspective. So thanks for your leadership there. As John said, I'm the product manager for real estate and leasing at SAP. So my job is helping to determine what we develop, when we develop it, and why we develop something around real estate and leasing, and development of our roadmap and planned innovations in this space. And we cover real estate from a corporate, commercial, and residential perspectives. So it's an interesting topic and very, very dynamic and always changing. So thanks for having me today, John.
Yeah, my pleasure, Tom, and thanks for joining us. So let's just set the stage for a moment on carbon accounting, net zero, and real estate, and what some of the issues are and challenges and why we're talking about this. So why does this matter, and why is it an important topic, and why would I encourage you as listeners to share this around as much as possible? For me, it's a passion in a way. I believe that among the biggest issues and challenges we face today is global warming. Whether you believe in global warming and the impact we're having, it's still an issue, and we should still be doing more to manage carbon emissions regardless. And we know that that's having an impact on the environment. Even if you don't believe that, some governments believe that, and they are increasing the focus on this idea of net zero carbon. And we are going to see, and we'll expect to see more and more around carbon accounting. And what does that mean? And how do you do carbon offsets? And how do we make sure that we're trying to be net zero? And the idea of net zero means that we're not contributing overall to the increase in carbon. So we're doing some ways to, as simple as plant a tree for every time you start the car, right? That's a simplistic example. But the reason we're talking about this topic here is, again, in doing research, I found that through a number of different research areas, whether it was through the World Economic Forum or through the UN or through many of the big consulting areas, I found that real estate and the building trade, so building and creation of real estate, is contributing 40 to 47% of this carbon emissions, and has had a huge impact. And of course, we know, Tom, through your research and what we know, that real estate is, if not the largest, certainly number one or two in terms of the assets that sit on a company's books or their expenses every year. And so it's something that they need to focus on and manage. But as you brought up when we started talking about this, don't forget vehicles and equipment, because we know that cars, vehicles, and different equipment have an impact on that. And I believe, and we believe, that you can have an impact now. Everybody can have an impact, and that real estate, SAP Intelligent Real Estate, is really a great tool for you. So Tom, just real quick from you.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a lot of this? I know you go to a lot of events, you hear these topics in the real estate world. Does this resonate?
It certainly is an important topic for companies, and there's really, I think, three reasons or motivators, if you will, to think about this topic. You brought up the first one, which is regulatory, right? I mean, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, governments are putting together regulatory measures that are going to require you to increase your sustainability in all areas, and you can just expect that. But also there's a strategic motivation, right? That you may have a competitive advantage by having a green space in your portfolio. If you are an operator of space, that your space becomes more attractive to tenants because of that it is more environmental friendly, but also you're producing and consuming less, so they're in the long run cheaper to operate, right? There's a financial benefit here that is involved. And then the third one is your corporate reputation. If you think about the direction of ESG reporting and having to report about your consumption and your environmental performance on your financial statements, this is going to impact your reputation in one way or another. So the time to act here is really now, and you need to start thinking about these topics and how you're going to move forward.
And you mentioned ESG, but and all of that, but we also have all of those investment groups that are out there now that are looking for companies that are on a target for net zero. So not only does it impact your performance from a business performance, right? The P&L, it hits the bottom line on P&L, but it can also have a huge impact on your stock price, right?
Yeah, your corporate reputation, exactly right. So yeah, it bleeds over to every aspect here and has many touch points, if you will. So you have a strong motivation to think about this today.
Cool. All right. So we came here to talk about, well, that's interesting. It did that. There we go. So we came to talk a little bit about, real estate, and I'm going to go back. I skipped too fast. What we're going to do, Tom, is, and as you know, we'll focus on folks on these four topic areas, just general areas. We'll talk about adding space, managing space, also your other leased assets, and Honeywell Forge, but really the idea of intelligent real estate and intelligent buildings and where SAP is going with that. But before we do that, Tom, what is SAP real estate? What is intelligent real estate, and what is SAP doing?
Well, let's a little background here. I think we talked a little bit about the background of sustainable real estate and why companies should be thinking about this, whether it's through compliance and cost reduction or better insights in their portfolio or providing a better tenant experience. I was at a Realcomm a couple weeks ago in Orlando, and smart buildings, transparency, tenant experience, employee co-working experience. These were all huge topics that are driving this industry, and really trying to understand what's happening in their real estate portfolios. And again, this is whether you're an operator of the space or you use it to support your primary business. You as a real estate professional, these are important topics to you, and you're being asked these questions all the time. Tenant experience is just as important for your employees in accounting, right, as this if you're leasing out that space, especially in this time of resignation and high employee turnover. The ability to reserve space and be able to have adequate co-working space. Since COVID, it isn't about going to the office, isn't about just going there to do a task. A lot of roles in jobs are, I go to an office to be with my coworkers and to have an event, meaning I need to work together to work on a project. We need to gather together to brainstorm on certain things, or to co-innovate, or to develop relationships. It isn't about going there, sitting in my cubicle for 8 hours a day, entering AP invoices, and then going home. That whole employee experience really has changed significantly since COVID and will continue to change. It's interesting that this whole co-working philosophy is expected to grow by over 5 times in the next 10 years. So if you think of just WeWork as one example today, the amount of space that WeWork has in their portfolio will be 5 times larger in 10 years, because companies don't want to own space. They want to be able to just use space to support their co-working and their employee needs. So a big transition happening in the marketplace.
Yeah, and I know, when I think of also, it's an experience of customers too, or the experience of partners. As a major partner, a big partner with SAP, when you go to the Palo Alto facility, or particularly, to the headquarters in Newtown Square, the impression you get of the company and the thought and the vibe you get is as much about what you see in the space and how it's laid out, and the new kind of space that they've put in the back, where they have that just all different kinds of places that you can sit, right? You can, from little tiny offices that you can close with doors, to just different cubicle environment spaces, and it creates a different vibe, if you will, but it also creates a different sense of collaboration. So I can see how SAP as a company is doing that, right?
Yeah, and it's important to always remember from a real estate perspective that for every dollar you spend on acquiring real estate, whether that's through a lease or through a purchase, you're going to traditionally spend $5 over its lifetime in maintenance.
Wow.
But 20 times that amount in the wages and benefits of the employees who occupy that space.
Oh, wow.
So we oftentimes think of, oh, real estate's the largest asset class in the world, and it is, but it's also one of the largest drivers of productivity that you have in your tool belt, if you will.
Wow.
Right. So the ability to say, oh, let's define different types of space around co-working environment, or booths to have private time to work and to think and to concentrate, right? Really building your space out so it's purpose built, opposed to going to a cube farm and sitting in there and just doing a task. The nature of work in offices is changing radically.
It is.
And that's why we talk about intelligent real estate. If you want to go to the next slide, we've built our intelligent real estate solution, which is, we call it intelligent because it's open and it's built
Mhm.
to be able to connect and extend to other applications. So gone are the days when we would just, oh, let's integrate and throw data back and forth between applications, like with the integrated work management system. The intent now is to have connected applications. So I'm connecting cloud to cloud or cloud to on-premise through APIs, and to be able to leverage and have that same digital twin, if you will, and share it across applications, opposed to having to try to replicate data back and forth between applications.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's one of the major tenets of our new real estate application, right, is to take this digital twin that sits in the cloud and be able to use it as the basis for other process-driven events, if you will. And some of those events, right, are things around sustainability.
Right.
So if we think about a partner like Honeywell, and
Mhm.
I'll talk more about this in just a second, but Honeywell, who's a major building management and systems provider, right? They have this huge portfolio of companies that use their building management systems that control the HVAC and the water supply and all these things. They have all these sensors and this data. But how do you bring that together and understand it and analyze it? And do I have to replicate a building in its structure in one application and then do the same thing in your building management system?
Exactly. Mhm. Mhm.
So the whole point here is to create it once and then
Mhm.
be able to leverage that digital twin, that structure, electronic structure of the building for other applications. And if you want to go to the next slide, this is exactly what we did with our partnership with Honeywell when we built their Forge application, in which we take that digital twin, which has been created in SAP, and then that's brought into the analytics, and now they're connecting their building management systems with that, as well as your financials that sit within SAP with that building management system and the location data, which
Yep.
starts to give you now this unique view of what's happening with your buildings. And
Okay.
we were talking to Realcomm about this, boy, I guess it would have been September or so of last year. And they're like, wow, this is like the nirvana. We've been talking about trying to do this for all these years. And now the future is reality. Now we have this ability to bring all this disparate information together and present it in one place using predefined metrics and outputs.
Right. Right. And because you do this on a building level, you can look at your leased space versus your own space and get some real sense of that as well, right?
Yeah, so it's your whole portfolio, whether it's you own it or lease it. From this perspective, you don't care. It's what are my operating costs of that building, and
Got it.
what can I do to decrease my operating costs? You know, maybe it's decreasing your footprint. You don't need as much because your occupancy is lower.
Mhm.
I have a slide that I think with Forge covers that scenario as well, where my cost per square foot is higher. So all right, let's figure out how we reduce that cost per square foot. Um, Maybe I'm cooling that building when no one's there,
Right.
so I can adjust my HVAC systems accordingly so they're more efficient.
Mhm.
You want to drop to the next slide, we can just give you another example of what Honeywell's doing here as far as occupancy and occupant health and safety, air quality
Right.
management, air quality control, connecting sensors to know who's occupying what space. Maybe no one ever goes to this portion of the building, so why heat it or cool it?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
things like that to really improve the operational efficiency of your buildings by bringing sensor and building management and financial, all this information together based off of a single unified digital twin. And the nice thing is that this app is available out of the SAP store. So
Right.
the content in that is available for you to purchase, and then it connects into not only your Honeywell systems, but also um, systems from other providers as well. So it's not just
Oh, great.
Honeywell, it's agnostic.
It's
Because
agnostic. Okay.
yeah, no company has just one building management provider across their portfolio. So this will connect
Mhm.
through all of them and give you
Okay.
that unified view.
And of course, the underlying power of this is really all in the SAP real estate solution because of it's such a broad and powerful solution, right?
Well, yeah, there's two areas that we're really giving you, I guess three areas that we're really giving you power, and one is the digital twin that I referred to, right? So I'm not
Right.
replicating data. The other is across the SAP suite of financials. So
Yeah.
I can now look at my financial data for that location with metrics of the size of the building based on that digital twin. So, what's it cost me per square foot? I mean, that's huge, because otherwise, how do you get that data? And how do you
Mhm.
perform that analysis? You have to somehow merge this information together for it to have any purposeful meaning to you, and to have this kind of thing available out of the box is pretty fantastic. And then the third thing is about that space management.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of talk about space utilization and occupancy, and there's been surveys done that generally 40% of a building is unoccupied at any single point of
Wow.
the day.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you think about that, okay, it's my largest asset class, it's the most expensive thing I have in my portfolio or on my income statement, except for salaries and benefits, and 40% of it's not used at any point in time.
Wow.
That's craziness. It's
It
absolute
is. Yeah.
craziness. So
Imagine that
anything
you
that
had
you
40% of your team that wasn't working. Oh.
yeah, exactly. It's
Right.
it's just it's just insane. So anything that you can do to improve that utilization and occupancy of that asset,
Right.
it goes directly to the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. So and companies are seeing this and they're saying, oh, what can I do to use this better? And what that may be sensors that are attached
Mhm.
to desks,
Right.
or a Wi-Fi signal that's anonymized. So you're able to say, this is the degree of occupancy based on Wi-Fi connections. We
Right.
don't know who's doing it, but we know that it's being occupied or people are in this part of the building, right? To use this information to say, all right, now I understand the degree of occupancy and I can start making intelligent decisions.
Right. That's great. So all of that kind of circles us back, and let's circle back to why we're here, which is, absolutely it's about the bottom line, but we're here to talk a little bit about carbon accounting and why it matters and what SAP. So all of this, I certainly can see Tom relating to that. So let's talk a little bit about carbon accounting and SAP. And a couple of things that I noted during, interestingly enough, during our conversation, but also watching your video from Realcomm, that I thought was very interesting. And so, um, as we see, and a statistic was very interesting that I saw in a number of different places, with all of the building that's going on globally in particular, we're adding basically the equivalent of one New York City, Manhattan, every month in terms of space all over the world. And at
Yeah.
that pace, of course, that's just crazy. So what we're seeing in trends is in that space. I'll ask you in a moment, what is it that SAP does as you're beginning to build, right? We understand how you're managing, but there's also tools available as you begin to make decisions around and build out space, whether it's through REFX and real estate itself or PPM or some of the other tools. And maybe you can also comment, because I thought this was fascinating as it relates to a potential retail client that we're talking to, this increased use of mixed space, mixed use, corporate, retail, and residential kind of all in one.
Hmm.
And you know, certainly using REFX and Analytics Cloud, and I'll put this up here because I think it tees up that conversation of, before you start down that road, maybe you ought to think about what space do you have and where are you and what's the average area of your workplaces and all of that. So maybe you can talk a bit about how does the real estate management help you think about that portfolio decision on whether to build new space, add to space, modify space, et cetera?
Yeah, so I mean, you can't measure, or you can't improve the situation if you don't measure
Mhm.
it, right? So how do I know what my occupancy is and if I really need additional space? Um, so our real estate solution obviously helps you with that, whether you're assigning individuals and teams to space or whether you're using sensors or other means to manage the degree of occupancy. But once you've made that decision that you're going to acquire space, whether you're building or leasing or lease out, SAP has different project management tools to help you with that, whether it's through the construction process and managing the construction, or whether it's just project management around it, right? We have tools within the suite to help you with that and to drive those projects. And also, I think some tools to help really standardize the process as well. And a lot of companies do this pretty good, but having one place that allows you to attach your documents and have the same process in place when looking at an acquiring space is crucial. But I don't think that's the question for today. I think this constant building of one New York City per month is changing. It's changing radically, and it's going to be very, very different in the next 10 years. If I put on my Nostradamus hat here and forecast the future, we're going to see a lot more of this hybrid mixed use space, and companies that maybe have built out their portfolio for own internal use are going to be looking for ways to right size that. And right sizing that space may be co-working, because co-working space is actually 4 times more profitable than the cost of the lease or ownership. So that may very well be a tool that's pulled out of the toolbox to say, hey, this is how we can reduce our real estate space. Employees are also looking for, I shouldn't say employees, I'm saying people are looking for a different experience in which I live, work, and play in the same area, in the same neighborhood without that commute. COVID did put a pause on this, right? That's why we see people buying homes in Boise, Idaho, and Spokane, Washington, and all over. You've seen that in your neighborhood, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But you're seeing a lot more movement back to this mixed use, and a lot more pressure on companies to right size their space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see this interesting trend of, as you said, this mixed use space. My son lives in Jersey City, which, we all used to make, jokes about, but it's becoming premium space. And what you see more and more of is mixed use space where they're introducing gyms and it's right next to or has incorporated into it, retail food outlets and things. And so, it's a very interesting a trend that we're starting to see. And I think it's something that companies can think about as they think of their carbon footprint. How do I bring that together in a way that helps minimize, travel? Think of when, before when I worked at AT&T, several of our buildings had no cafeteria. So you either brought your lunch or you had to get in a car, go drive somewhere to another place. Again, the impact of that is fairly significant. So, yeah.
Yeah. This mixed use model, I think, is absolutely the way of the future. And what we're doing today, as far as this building, is completely unsustainable.
Wow.
I'm thinking of the statistic. It was something like 80% of the material in the landfill comes from construction activities.
Wow.
I mean, because you can recycle a lot of things, but when you start getting down to materials that are involved in the construction of a building, there's a huge amount of waste that goes to landfills.
Yep.
And it's interesting to see some of the things that are happening there to reduce that waste. But
Mm-hmm.
let's repurpose space. We're going to have malls, frankly, that are going to be empty.
Yep.
The times are really hard, and that's a perfect candidate for mixed use space of retail. You already have some restaurants in there, but why not office space? Why not
Yeah.
loft apartments, right? These kinds of things will be changed out, and we could view it as, I think, very attractive if it's in an area where people want to live, work, and play.
Yeah, and Tom, that's an interesting point, and we can talk about the effective use of existing space, right? You're kind of hinting at that, and how REFX really gives you a view of the space you're using, the common areas. What about indoor, outdoor? But here, I live. I believe you're in Utah, right? And I'm in the desert Southwest, where the reservoirs are at historic lows. 7 states are fighting one another for water rights.
Yep.
And again, we don't think about this. Efficient, effective water use is also part of that Honeywell Forge and looking at your water impact, not just we think of the carbon impact and the impact there, but it's also about water management too, right?
It's all consumption is what you really need to be managing, whether that consumption is of fuels, right, of electricity or gas, but it's also water and the output there. I don't know if you've ever been to that Newtown Square office, but
Yep.
that water is captured from rainfall and snow melt into a cistern, and then it's used for non-potable uses over the course of the year, right? So instead of using clean water for watering or flushing toilets, you can use what's been captured
gray
from
water
other
or something
sources, gray
similar.
water, right? Non-potable water, and that's absolutely another trend of being able to manage. And that's a decision you can make when you monitor.
Exactly.
You are looking at your consumption.
Exactly, and you can look at the occupancy and the tools involved in REFX and intelligent real estate and really do that. You can also do subleasing. If you have unoccupied space, why have a company build more space just for themselves when you could create mixed use or sublease, right? And all of that can be managed in SAP. So.
Right, and that subleasing of space, I think will become a much larger topic in the very near future as companies look to right size their portfolios and look for that subleasing of space to really become co-working of space, meaning that you're able to take a space within part of your portfolio, enable it to be leased out or rented on a daily basis or a weekly basis through a network, and you monetize it. So that's one way of right sizing the portfolio as well. Another way to do it.
Yeah, or
But yes,
provided as a
absolutely
benefit.
manage subleases and within a solution. And the whole point
Yeah,
is
well,
to capture that.
Exactly, or think of managing that as and we're getting a little off topic, but imagine allowing that as a partner channel benefit. That if you as a partner of a company, we have a WeWork type space that if you need space, we can make that available because you're an SAP partner, for example.
Exactly.
Right? Those are great opportunities. One of the areas, and we talked about real estate a lot here, and of course that's huge, but we hinted or talked a little bit about non-movable or movables, right? We've talked a lot about real estate, but what about non-movables or movables rather? And I love, I picked up these pictures to have a little bit of fun with this, but how many of the companies have cranes or trucks that look like this running PCs when the world is moving away from that? And I saw Caterpillar now offers EV front loaders. We have everybody moving to the cloud, right? No longer are we all with giant PCs. This is obviously an old IBM PC, but the world is moving to hosted solutions. Look at SAP moving the world in terms of the public cloud or the private cloud. Everything moving to the cloud is really another way to maybe decrease that footprint. And of course, I just love this 3D printing of foundations and buildings. I think is a phenomenal move. But the point of this really is to talk about how SAP really not only helps you understand and manage your real estate portfolio, but because of the power of CLM, contract lease management, you also have tremendous visibility into your movables and your leased assets and understanding that, right?
Well, yes, and I think that's an important point, is that when you're looking at your ESG reporting, yes, there's going to be this area for buildings, but as a corporate total, you need to be able to report, okay, what are my greenhouse gases, what are my carbon emissions that I've done?
Right.
And only a piece of that are the buildings, as you've said. These movable assets, the forklifts in your warehouses, the cars that you lease, the computers, all of these items have to be considered or included in this calculation. So without visibility into your contracts and your contract portfolio, there's no way you're going to be able to comply with this reporting. You have to have them abstracted. I always go back to my favorite story when I was a consultant about working with the company, and we were looking to abstract their leases and implementing contract and lease management. And they were identifying all their leases, and the organization in Australia came back and said, here are our 5 leases that we have for Australia. And I said, really? For the entire continent of Australia, you're a huge company, you have 5 leases, that's all you have? Yeah, that's all we have. Said, no, go back and check again. Well, it turns out I think there were like 126 leases sitting in somebody's drawer that they had absolutely no idea were even existed, right? They were just being automatically paid. So how could you possibly do any kind of accounting, carbon accounting and ESG reporting if you don't know it exists? And that's a point where CLM is really going to be a valuable tool, especially when it's integrated with your financials in the planned carbon accounting ledger that SAP is working on, that you'll be able to move these values and the carbon consumption related to these assets directly, from contract and lease management.
Yeah, and I included a couple of screenshots here of some of the SEC tools that are available, some of the ones that we've developed through dashboards. But you look at again this idea of expiry of some of your leases, and you can begin to look at that portfolio and say, wait a minute, I have 10-year leases on vehicles. What's up with that? Maybe I need to kind of start thinking about where are all of those assets, as you pointed out, Tom, and what are they? You can look at all of these and begin to get a sense, right? So you can look at your asset count. Okay, well, I have buildings, but look at all, I have vehicles, I have printers, I have computer hardware, and these numbers are small, but many of our customers, these numbers are in the thousands. And why am I buying a new PC when I might have a whole embedded lease portfolio somewhere else? Or maybe I look at my vehicle lease portfolio and it tells me most of the vehicles I have are quite old, right? So there's a lot to be said for that, right?
Right, or what of those vehicles, those leases are EV versus run on gas, so diesel. So I mean, these are the kinds of things that you need to understand, and without some visibility into your contract, you cannot make intelligent decisions.
Sure. So let's talk about, you talked about the Honeywell thing. I think you talked a lot about that. But I'm going to put this slide up here just as a placeholder. You talked about some of the innovations that are coming. And I know you have to be, we'll be cautious, folks. The standard statement of, what we share here is just talk. No guarantees that anything's coming out, any of that typical roadmap statement. But Tom, what is SAP thinking about, and what are some of the things top of mind for you as you look at the future of real estate and carbon accounting as it relates to real estate in particular?
Yeah, so I think we have to look at carbon accounting holistically across the organization, whether that's through your supply chain, whether that's through leased assets, whether that's through real estate itself. And because of that, we have a project being led through the financials of developing a carbon accounting ledger. Now,
Okay.
again, this is a roadmap stuff, and no guarantees that this will be
Not going to
delivered
hold
in a
you to it.
document.
Not going to
That's
hold you
right.
to it.
But the fact is of having a carbon accounting ledger in which, just like you have a general ledger today that's capturing your accounting entries, you have a carbon accounting ledger that's capturing your carbon entries. So really interesting topic and very, very, I think, innovative approach is what's being worked on today there. Also, SAP's invested a lot in their sustainability control tower, which is you're able to take values through different parts of your organization and with content to be able to understand what's happening within your portfolio again. So think of that as the analytical arm, you will, of being able to complete your ESG reporting. And again, most organizations have disparate data sources. So to be able to connect to those different data sources and have one tool to support the sustainability analytics is huge. So that's also under development and an important milestone for us. And then within real estate itself, you can't measure what you don't know. So our solution is to be able to start to capture, what are our attributes of these buildings, least LEED certified, not, how's it heated, what's the HVAC on it? I mean, capturing all of these attributes and then being able to use these kinds of attributes in reporting and be able to start making intelligent decisions around your portfolio. That's also a planned innovation.
Okay. And one thing that occurs to me, I mean, there's a couple of things that, it's only SAP, in my opinion. You can look at some of these other building management solutions that are not tied to broader solutions around whether it's ERP or other areas. And it just kind of came to me, and I'm interested in your thoughts, is, think about how SAP, we have this building portfolio, we have this portfolio of assets all over the place, right? But the assets are there, the real estate is there to enable, and as you said, to support a workforce. SAP has success factors. Imagine being able to tie together your vision of an overall understanding of where your people are and through success factors, tie that to your real estate portfolio for certainly a much more insightful analysis of your business, your needs, right?
Yeah, well, that's certainly one level of it, right? And that integration with success factors is something that we have provided. But I think that's only one part of the story. One is not only what office is someone assigned to, but what is the closest office and where does it make the most sense to position your offices based on where people live?
Yep.
So if your office is on the opposite side of town, is that really where you want to have that office? Or if you find that teams are consistently flying in to a location to perform some function of work, well, maybe it makes sense to co-work or share space in that city so teams aren't flying in. Think about having that connected with Concur so you can make a reservation for co-working space at the same time, or even reserve a workspace at the same time you book a reservation for travel. So I have a hot desk that's waiting for me when I get to the office.
Exactly.
And again, I think SAP is probably one of the few organizations in the world that has the size, scope, and breadth to really make a difference here.
Yeah, yeah, and then I think of, when you go visit, again, the Newtown Square office, the fact that there's a Hilton right there with, there's a Whole Foods, there's an MOD Pizza, but there's also a pharmacy. I mean, think about, and think about the fact of what that cuts down in terms of me renting a vehicle. I don't have to rent a vehicle because if I'm just going in to visit the office, that hotel being right in that proximity, on a nice day you could walk, but there are shuttles, right? Think of, again,
Yeah.
all of that goes into thinking about connecting a bigger perspective, right?
And this is the long-term direction of, I think, where companies need to be thinking about is, let's be brutally honest, the Newtown Square location isn't exactly awesome. I mean, it's a long ways from the airport, and
Yep.
it takes a while to get there, and there aren't a ton of things. I mean, it's better than it used to be. I remember staying there once and having to stay in one of the old employee housing
The
things
cottages.
the cottages, and I think one of them was supposedly haunted or something, right?
Yes.
But I mean, things have changed for the better. But in the long run, if you think about locating your operations, they need to be where your people are, and they need to be in a place where people want to work, live, and play.
Yep.
And
Well, I
that's
think
the
of the new
direction that
Hudson
we're going.
Yards, right, as a great
Hudson Yards is a great example of that. Right, in a centralized location that meets the needs of your workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get a little bit off topic, but the idea is thinking about that. I'm sure that, SAP and the leadership looked and said, let's think about where people are, where our customers are, and managing that space efficiently and effectively so that people can have a better experience, but tying it to carbon accounting, tying it to
Yeah,
sustainability. So,
absolutely.
cool.
I mean, without divulging anything, right? SAP absolutely is looking at their real estate portfolio and right sizing that and saying where should it be? I mean, we're going through the same exercise as
Yep,
everybody else.
absolutely. So, a couple of minutes left. I've, as always, Tom, enjoyed the conversation. Kind of wrapping it up, I just want to say, again, thank you. I always enjoy talking to you and talking to your colleagues, in this space, and I think we see more and more opportunities for innovation to use um, SAP real estate to help drive carbon accounting and think about these assets in many different ways. And of course, in many different industries, we've talked about just managing corporates, but imagining applying some of this to transportation intensive industries where transportation is a big deal in terms of your spend and how are you managing that also can be tied together into this space. So we know carbon accounting and net zero are big. It's coming. Bramasol spent a lot of time looking at. We talked about ASC A42 for lease accounting. We do revenue accounting. Carbon accounting is the next big thing. I would expect to see ASC 999 or something right around carbon accounting or something, and of course we'll be there with you on that. Real estate and vehicles comprise, if not certainly one of the most significant portions of emissions and contributions to carbon accounting. That's amazing, the statistic that you shared, Tom, about what percentage of landfill is driven by
Construction
building
waste.
and
Yeah.
construction waste and just all of that in general. We have this vision of piles and piles of diapers, and don't get me wrong, we should focus on that, but maybe we should be thinking a little bit more about the space we have, managing and using a tool like SAP Intelligent Real Estate and Real Estate. You so well said, and we talk about what gets measured gets managed, and SAP has the tools, has incredible tools, as you've seen through the Forge Alliance and the tools that you can use through there. Certainly the sustainability cockpit and tower that are coming soon, but the basic functionality to understand where are you today, what space do you have, how are you using that space. Companies really need to get a holistic understanding of what's going on, and of course how that applies to in what we call insights to action. right? You know, when you and I were doing a lot of the ASC 842 compliance work, we kept telling people, how do you make decisions about, you know, what leased assets you have if you don't know what leased assets you have? Same thing here. How do you know if you
Yep.
don't measure it? And so, you know, REFX is a tool you can use now, today. Lots of customers have it. Lots of customers can get it. And you can do it today in ECC and move to S/4HANA very easily. Tom and his team have made that process easy for companies. So don't stop. And I guess the one thing I would say is, you know, with a person, with young people, with kids, I encourage people, start now. Get in front of this. Use the tools that are available. Check out what SAP has online. Check out some of our blogs and learn more, because I think it's such an important topic. So Tom, again, thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much, everybody who joined. And for those of you here in the US, please enjoy safely the 4th of July holiday that's coming up. Check out our other webinars and make it a great day.
Thanks, John.